This machine is my Pantorouter. It's for cutting tenons and other types of joints using a router. A frequently asked question about this machine is, where do I get my router? And it's very simple. You need one of these routers with an interchangeable base. Pretty much any of that style will do. The problem is, outside of North America, this style of router is hard to get and expensive if you can get them. And what's more commonly available is a router more like this one with a built-in plunge base. And the problem with this style of router is, with the built-in handles and all, it's just far too bulky to try to fit it into the pantograph mechanism. So I've come up with a larger design, and I made a one-to-one printout, and this one should be big enough to hold a plunge router in it. Mostly I made the pantograph larger, but that also required a taller table and a taller template holder. And while I was at it, I made a few other minor design changes. And I used my Big Print program to make a big one-to-one printout of a whole lot of the parts in the machine. I'm going to start by making the pantograph mechanism for the router, and some of those parts I have as one-to-one here, and some of the other parts are mostly rectangular, so I'm just going to work from the drawings for those. The links are going to pivot on some steel rod like this, and I need to make sure I get the position for the holes exactly right. It's really important to get a fairly tight fit with the steel rod, so I drilled some test holes, and this one has actually got a little bit of play on it. It slides too easily, and I drilled that one with a 3/16 inch brad point bit. But I do want to drill them with a brad point bit initially because these drill more precisely. They don't follow the grain so much. So what I've come up with is to use a slightly smaller bit. This is 1/64 down. Drill the pilot hole and then use a 3/16 inch regular non-brad point bit to kind of ream that out to the final size. And that makes for a fit that is quite tight. I just cut the pieces of plywood for the pantograph links, so now I can start gluing those together. I'm going to start by clamping this on the back dry, just to help me align everything else. Now this should come out flush right here. Now I'm going to take the back rail off again, and I'm using the same procedure to glue the short link as well. While I'm waiting for the glue to dry, I'm going to make these front two layers for the pantograph. I have the cutout in this part dimensioned here, but you're better off actually making sure that this matches the base of your router, and that will make it much easier to position the router precisely. By now the glue has dried on this length, so now I can glue this part on here. And what's really important is that these two are exactly the same distance from the end. My design originally had the operating lever as one piece, but I've just changed my mind. I think it's better to build it up the same way that I've built up these links out of 2 pieces of hardwood and some plywood. So I've already started making this one, and just like I made these ones, I glued these parts on there, and now I just have to make sure this lines up precisely as I glue it. The holes I drilled with a regular 3/16 inch drill bit are a little bit too tight to easily insert the shaft into, so I made a reamer out of another piece of shaft by cutting a slot along here with a hacksaw. And with that, I can clear out the holes a little bit so that this goes in there without any play, but it still slides. I can now start to put the pantograph mechanism together. So depending on what type of router, it may fit in here perfectly well with the handles, or for this one, for example, there is a bit of a problem in that the handles are just a bit too large. And let's see, the router goes in here, but as I tilt, the handles start to hit this part here. And even if I flip this around and put it in the other way around, I still start hitting the handle here. So I could either try to cut away some of the handles or cut away part of the links here. So I could have made the pantograph bigger to fit any router, but it's pretty large as it is. Playing around with this some more, I'm realizing this is actually right now tilted at 45 degrees, but I really only need to go to 60 degrees to get the right range of motion. And just checking that angle here, that's tilted just a bit more than 60 degrees. And at that angle, if I put this router in here, I actually still have room for the handles. So it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Here I'm cutting out the base for the pantograph, and that has 2 corners cut out of it, which I'm cutting on the table saw and then finishing the cuts on the bandsaw. The blocks that the pantograph pivots on needs to have holes in it that are exactly perpendicular, and I figure by rotating every increment of drilling, that should compensate for errors in the drill press. Despite all precautions, when I drilled the hole in this thing and I put it on here, I noticed that this was at a slight angle. You notice there's a gap here and none here. And if I flip it around, the gap is here and not here. So the hole is crooked in this part here. So I drilled another hole, and this one was also crooked, and I drilled another one, and it was also crooked. And then finally I drilled this one, and this one is nice and perpendicular like it's supposed to be. I have to be very careful that the center line of the holes lines up with the center of this thing, and all 3 blocks will be aligned here. And now to get the screw hole locations, I just put the screws in here and whack them. The pantograph is going to go in between these 2, but there's going to be a cam on either side of these for help supporting that, so that tells me the front block needs to go about this far forward. Until I make the cams for here, I'm just going to use some scraps of wood to keep that pantograph from sliding back and forth. For this Pantorouter for now, I'm going to use this old router which has a broken on-off switch, since I have to switch it externally anyways. And for mounting that, the way I figured is to mount that to a piece of plywood that goes on here. So it's mounted the way people typically mount them, but I lose a little bit of depth of cut that way. I want the chuck to be forward as far as possible. So I've got some shafts here that fit into the router base, and I'm going to mount it to those, and that way I can bring that base forward as far as I can. It's really important that the router bit ends up exactly in the middle between those two holes, so to make sure the alignment in this direction is exact, I drew a center mark basically like here and here, and that just needs to go on the center line. And let's make sure this is also square, so it can go right here. So far I've only got the router coupled to the front panel, and with these holes and thin shafts that doesn't give enough support going like this. So I need to somehow couple that to the part on the back, and for that I made these things here, and that'll just screw to the front and back. And then this part goes on here, and that'll give me plenty of rigidity. Now it turns out the cutout for these handles was unnecessary because these just unscrew. But if you have a router where the handles don't come off and you want to be able to take it out, you just have to make this cutout more like so. So the router comes out this way, and that would still be fairly rigid. It turns out I put these things too close to the edge, and so my range of motion is restricted by hitting those. But the minimum reach from here to the router bit needs to be 18 centimeters, and I can actually fold it in almost that far. So I just have to round the corners a little bit and then it'll be okay. So this Pantorouter is far from done. I still need a stock holding table, template holder, and plunge sled, but I've rigged it up to try it out. Here's my temporary stock holding table, the template holder, just some boxes, and no plunge function, so I just have to cut full depth in one go. Well, seems to work. Well, I think this video is going to be long enough as it is already, so I'll finish this machine in my next video, or 2 or 3 or whatever it takes until it's done.